Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend Colin Hung. The world of technology and healthcare ever-changing in new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news meshed together in new ways, which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. And today we'll be asking the question, is AI eating healthcare? And be sure to follow the show on social media at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 17 years of health IT blog content at healthcareittoday.com. I love this callback. I think it was Andreessen Horowitz, founder of Netscape. He said software is going to eat the world. So is AI eating healthcare? What do you think?
I don't know if it's going to eat healthcare, but today
it's a lot to eat.
It's a lot to eat, and maybe some people want it to. I don't know, but it's definitely. I think AI is the dominant topic of the moment, right? Like you can't go anywhere, whether it's in the consumer world, whether it's just in the business world, without running into something around AI. And in healthcare, it's been the hot topic du jour for sure.
It's interesting how it aligns with the burnout that's happening right now, because AI done well actually improves burnout, makes you more efficient, makes you enjoy your job more, because AI does eat the mundane tasks that none of us really want to do. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think definitely AI, in my mind, has a play in that efficiency side. I'm not sure it has a play on the or that we're ready yet for it to play really hard on the clinical side. But I definitely think AI right now is having a moment, right? Like you couldn't walk down the aisles of Vive or Hims without running into at least 70% of the booths talking about AI something, right? Or the fact that they had AI or doing something with AI. So definitely, it's definitely having its moment right now.
Yeah. I mean, I jokingly tweeted out that it's great that every HIMS company has become an AI company that solves burnout and revenue. So, which is what you just described.
Yeah. What's funny though, is I'm not 100% sure. Is it truly just people jumping on the, I'll call it marketing bandwagon and the power of AI and the fact that it's on the minds of everyone? Or is it that, they think companies are thinking that without mentioning it, or if they don't have an AI strategy, that they won't get funding? All right, or they won't get customers, right? Like I'm curious to find that out.
I mean, it's definitely a customer play. The funding, is challenging, especially at HIMS. You don't see as many startups unless you go to the startup area, right?
Sure.
Most of them, same with Vive. You don't get as many. You get more established companies that are doing AI, which their customers are probably saying, "What's your AI strategy?" But I actually think the reason that AI is having a moment is this acceleration of data processing power, and then just all of that kind of coming together along with storage and bandwidth to be able to share that data and all those things. Like all of those have come together. And I think it was actually at one of the conferences, I heard this AI expert talking that like it is that natural curve, right? Where it's like right now we're like, wait, AI's coming, and then it just boom, like the innovation around it and what it's able to do just hockey sticks, right? And I think we're seeing that hockey stick right now because of the processing power and the data that can be applied to that processing power that's allowing AI to have that moment and allow what we always dreamed about and watched in your favorite sci-fi movies, is now actually a reality. And you can see that it's like when you see certain AI implementations, you're like, oh, this is here.
Yeah, I think no doubt. I mean, without the infrastructure that we have now, AI that we're talking about today wouldn't have been possible. Like how high-speed internet has made streaming possible, has made all these other industries possible that didn't exist before. AI is having that moment because we have, you're right, like the storage, the bandwidth, the computing power, right? Even though we're still sort of short of chips, right? Like it's all now possible. And I think it's captured the imagination of people as they see some of these early implementations of AI, especially in healthcare, right? But it's to me, it's still early. I mean, it's very early days, and certainly the technology to me, is very impressive, and I think there's a really interesting future for it to be applied in healthcare, but it's still pretty narrow. Like, as much as I'd love the, not that I love, but as much as I, hear the stories about how we're heading towards Terminator and Skynet, and you look at what these AI tools are doing. It's like it's writing text, right? Like
Yeah.
it's figuring out what temperature the room should be. It's optimizing someone's schedule, right? It's not like operating like, we've had autopilots forever on airplanes. Like no one's complained about that, right? Like that taking the functionality of AI that we have today, although isn't impressive, is still very narrowly focused, which is really great for the kind of task work that you're talking about, John. Like where hey, it can be really a fantastic efficiency play.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really exciting right now is the whole large language models and taking all of the language and knowledge that's available on the internet and doing something cool with it, enabling people to do things to that, and it's doing things more efficiently than you would have previously. And I was talking with someone recently, they're like, well, where do they get all this data? And I told them, and I don't have a good source for this, but I imagine for like $50 million or $100 million, you could have the entire internet of data. Like it's not that expensive now, right? Because the spiders have been crawling it and getting all of that data. It's pretty inexpensive relative to what, when you think Google did that originally, right? Like, and spend billions and billions of dollars trying to figure out how do we do this, and has, over the years spent, who knows, probably in the trillions at that point. But, but now, for 50 to $100 million, you have the entire breadth of knowledge that's been shared on the internet, which is just about everything. And so to me, that access to that amount of data to be able to train these learning models with the processing power that doesn't take 6 months or a year to do, but it can actually do it quickly and understand the whole breadth of knowledge that is the internet. That's where it's so powerful, and we're seeing that applied a lot of ways, including genomics is going to be the same problem, right? Instead
Right.
of words, though, it's going to be biomarkers and different things like that. But it's the same problem, it's the same scale of a problem that we have in the rest of the internet.
Yeah, and actually that kind of brings up the question I wanted to ask you, John. You know, we know that healthcare produces a lot of data. By some estimates, it's like 30% of the world's data is actually healthcare related. Crawling that, accessing, applying AI to that would be very exciting. But where are you seeing some exciting deployments in terms of AI in healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. So it's become the hot topic on healthcare IT today. It's been most of the interviews, but if you look at someone like H2O AI, that's providing the tools of AI to any company that wants it or any organization that wants it, that's really interesting, right? Because they can do it across PDFs versus granular data versus whatever solution you're trying to do, you can use something like that, which is really interesting. And I think all of this AI talk is going to accelerate companies like that. Then, you have other ones like Amwell, who acquired Conversa, and how they're applying the AI to telehealth and remote patient monitoring, which is a cool area, right? I saw a company, Atropos Health, which goes in and looks at all of the real world data to give you an analysis of the information that's available based on real world data to help you treat a patient. And, you talked about like the clinical sides behind. When you see what Atropos does, it's like, wow, that's incredible on a clinical side of things, to be able to provide that type of detailed health clinical data to an individual patient, but it's based on real world data rather than study data, because in many cases there is no study data for the diseases that need to be done. And then you also have, on the administrative side, companies like Outbound AI that are looking at, how do I do this administrative stuff, or even Boston Software Systems, right, with their RPA and things like that, that are saying, how do I address all of this administrative overhead? And so, I mean, those are a few that kind of stand out for me.
Yeah, for me, the ones that stand out in terms of the application is anything around improving workflow. right? Because I think mentally, culturally, we're ready for that. We're ready for AI to help us improve and prioritize and help us be more efficient as individuals.
Yeah.
I look at what a lot of the companies at RSNA are doing, right, with image processing, whether that was GE Healthcare or Siemens or Ramsoft or companies like that, that we're looking at that stack of images that a radiologist had to read, and kind of looking at them all and going, well, these ones look normal. So you can probably just prioritize those as you normally would. But boy, these ones here, they look like they have something abnormal in them, something a little bit odd. Maybe you want to prioritize these ones first, right? Because otherwise it's just first in, first out. But
Yeah.
now with AI tools, they can be more efficient by looking at the ones that it has flagged to say something's different here. So it's not making that diagnosis, it's not seeing if you have cancer or not, but it's making that radiologist so much more effective, and in turn improving the patient experience. So I'm excited about those types of technologies. I'm also excited about some of the technologies that are coming in around the chatbot style stuff, right,
Hmm.
which allow people to navigate healthcare a little bit better, right? That can answer some questions about medications. It can answer some questions about, hey, what am I supposed to be doing ahead of this appointment? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And you don't necessarily want to tie up a nurse for that. So a simple AI to answer those kinds of questions, to guide the people to the right point of access, right, before they talk to the agent. To me, those are really effective and exciting ways. I mean, I even saw, how companies like Inovalon, right, and Waystar on the RCM side are using AI to improve those processes. So I'm definitely excited about a lot of those workflow.
Yeah, and Orbit is doing some interesting stuff with voice and the chatbot that you talked about to answer some of those questions. One of the coolest things I saw at HIMSS was Belong.life. They created this conversational AI chatbot, but for the cancer patients in their community. And it's built off of the data from all of those cancer patients and they have a huge number of the cancer patients that use their application to understand and to evaluate what they should do. And it was incredible how it could take all of that data and present it. You could ask questions like, I actually did it with the thyroid cancer. I said, tell me about thyroid cancer and what you should expect, right? And it spit out a really specific answer that was very different. I'm interested to see, what is Wohler's Kluwer going to do with their up-to-date software? They have all the data, but how can we put a conversational AI front end to make it more useful? I think that's really interesting. Of course, I have to mention ambient clinical voice, which we've talked about many times, but we're seeing an acceleration of competition in that space. Sure, Nuance has DAX and has DAX Express, which they announced, but Ambience Healthcare is in there. On Point Healthcare Partners is coming, and for that same ambient clinical voice space, Suki's doing a little different approach with more kind of templated voice commands, and we'll see how that continues to evolve and where they go with it. So, those are exciting things. Anyway, I could talk forever. Like sick bay is another one I was just thinking of, which with their virtual ICU, it's like, okay, well, you have all this data coming from your virtual ICU, but how do you process all that data? Well, the answer to that is going to be AI that's processing all the signals and data from the different sensors, devices, cameras, etc., that know, oh, this one is actually in need of you more than someone else who's doing fine. The signals are looking good. And then I'll just throw in one more before I give up the mic, but like the security vendors, there is so much data with attacks and hacks and phishing, etc. AI is going to be the way to solve that because humans can't go through the logs, right? So companies like Proofpoint, Fortinet, CrowdStrike, they're going to be leveraging AI to facilitate your security efforts because you just literally can't go through all of the attacks. And to be fair, 99% of the attacks, 99.9% of the attacks don't matter because they're not actually breaching you. They're just attacking you and you blocked it effectively. So it's knowing those abnormalities there. Even VMware, I talked to them recently about how they're using AI to monitor either your workstation or your server and know what its normal behavior is. And then if it sees something that's outside of your normal behavior, it alerts you to it and you can go and investigate and address it. So anyway, there you go.
No, those are great. I mean, just to add on that really quickly, I mean, I had a recent discussion with NetScout, right, and the teams there around this very issue and how they're using AI to improve performance and to monitor. And when they see something that's abnormal, regular server behavior, as you put it, their AI kicks in and warns people. So I think that's great. But again, I think it just goes back to that whole workflow thing I was talking about.
Yep.
But hey, listen, if you're just tuning in, you are listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today, we are talking about whether AI will eat healthcare. And I think, John, so far, we have to say it's looking like it probably will in terms of the amount of places that it's being sprinkled upon.
AI is hungry, and healthcare has a lot of places that need to be fed.
That's true. That's true. Well, let me ask this question in reverse. Where don't you think AI will have an impact on healthcare, or is there an aspect of healthcare that you just don't think AI is going to apply?
Yeah, I actually think, what you tweeted from the ECW conference from their CEO, that, hey, this is going to augment, it's not going to replace the doctor. And it seemed like that was their focus. You can comment if you want, but, that seems where, it's like, at least for the next 5 years, most of it is going to be, how do I make you more efficient rather than how can I replace you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And by the way, thanks for pointing that tweet out. At the Clinical Works user conference that they had there for the FQHCs and the community health centers, they definitely were showing off AI almost in every aspect of their application, right? They have totally jumped in with both feet, swinging in the deep end of AI. And I give them kudos for doing that, just to embrace it so much. But yeah, I think the where the audience was most excited for AI was, again, on the administrative stuff and on the workflow stuff. I think they were sort of like, oh, that's cool that it can do some sort of a diagnosis enhancement, and clinical decision support stuff. But we're probably not going to. You could tell there was some like, not sure we're ready for that. Not sure my docs are going to really go for that. Yeah, I agree with you. I think in the next 5 years, we probably won't see as much movement towards diagnosis and treatment, at least for the most severe cases. I don't think AI is going to touch that yet. I don't think we are culturally ready for that yet.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah, and I think the technology might get there, but I think, also, I'm not sure the data is there yet to even start to begin that, right? Like, we're not asking the questions of what was trained and what was used to train that data, right? Like, anyway, we can get into that in a minute, but yeah, I do think the clinical side is probably one area where we won't see as much movement on the AI. However, I think on every other aspect of healthcare, we're going to see a tremendous amount of use of AI.
Yeah, and I would just add a nuance, I guess, with the clinical side. I think we're going to see it applied, but there's always going to be a human in the loop for the next certain period because of liability. And so the AI is going to present the information to a human who then says, yes, I agree or I disagree. Although, that's going to be interesting to see how that evolves, right? We've seen this initially in the radiology space where they actually showed that the radiology images can be analyzed by AI more effective than a human. But we've talked about this before on the program, that for some reason we expect 100% perfection from AI, but we don't from humans. So that's the cultural thing that we need to overcome, which is that better does not have to be perfect. And that's a problem for a lot of people culturally in a culture and environment where we do no harm. So I think that's where it'll be interesting. Plus, I'm sure there's going to be stories of AI gone rogue, right? Whether it's a chatbot on a healthcare website that kind of goes rogue, and then everyone's going to just recoil, right? And this is the lesson we learn all the time with technology, and we have to be careful of. And I think we should be aware of that. Hey, just because AI makes one mistake that is gross and egregious, and maybe even had an awful outcome. Well, if it's done 10,000 before that were more efficient and that were great and provided a great service, let's not, throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, it actually, the CEO of Jaresh at ECW, hopefully I pronounced that right.
Yep.
He gave a great example to temper everything that he was about to show, right? He was clearly excited about AI, but
Right.
he did the example where he typed into chat GPT like interface and said, hey, write me a piece about, I think it was said his daughter or his niece and her wonderful experience working at ECW. And it just came back with this giant paragraphs of stuff, right? And it drew in some examples of what the work ECW, and then it basically said, yeah, but they don't work for ECW, right? Like, so this AI generated this wonderful output, but the input was flawed, right? It wasn't everything it generated, it wasn't true. And so he
Right.
said, so you got to keep in mind that this is still a problem. Like, it doesn't know to come back and say, actually, wait a minute, you're the person you're asking me about doesn't actually work at the company you asked me to write about. So I'm going to spit that back as the answer. Right now, it assumes that is true and just writes that. So that, I think that was a really good example to show there are some limitations on where we can apply AI. And to your point, John, I think diagnosis, we're perhaps not ready for it to fully take over yet. So,
Yeah, and
and I think the words that they used was, right now AI is a co-pilot, not a pilot, right? It's the
Mm,
assist. It's not. It's
nice.
meant to be sort of, but a human being is always going to be there at the controls, and we want to help that human being be as effective and as efficient as possible, not take over for them.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting just the way that we're going to depend on it or not depend on it, right? Because it's true, AI doesn't know what the truth is, right? It just knows what it's been told before. And so I think we're going to go through this interesting evaluation where we say, can we implement this and are patients safe, right? There's a lot of interesting ethical questions there. And there was a recent study that I just saw the headline on Twitter. So, I haven't dove into it, but it made sense intuitively when I saw the headline that said even those that were trained radiologists, when the AI said something, they assumed it was right. And that could be a very dangerous thing. And it's something we should understand about AI, that at some point, if it has been right, the first 50 times that we've done it, then we start to assume that it's perfect and that it's right and that it's infallible. And that becomes its own problem, right? That when we're not skeptical of it, and we've seen this in other clinical decision support in healthcare, right? Where a doctor has gotten so used to the drug to drug interactions, drug to allergy interactions, that they stop thinking about it because they just trust the system so well. And so we're going to go through this evolution of how much should we trust or should we not? And it will go back and forth. The other thing that I think is interesting on this kind of ethics and equity, and this may be worth of a whole other episode in a future episode, but it's whether AI considers all populations. And there's a double-edged sword with AI when it comes to equity, because in many ways it doesn't discriminate on the populations, because it literally spits out whatever it has. But if the data is bad, then it can discriminate. So it's going in and saying, well, does the data represent the actual populations that we're dealing with? And then assuming that it does, it could be actually a good boon to health equity. So, that's the other AI consideration, is what populations is the data coming from?
Yeah, and I think that to me is the biggest challenge. And actually, that was a big topic of discussion at the SaaS Innovate conference I was just at. That's
Okay.
the SaaS company, SaaS Institute, and they had a VP. They actually have a VP of ethics over their data and their AI. And his name is Reggie Townsend. Fantastic person. Loved speaking with him. And he brought this very thing up, and to the extent where SaaS actually has a dashboard that you can point at an AI and the data it was based on, that would tell you how biased it is or isn't, how representative it is
Wow.
and isn't, given on some input parameters. And he was saying, yeah, like in healthcare, we are far from having that perfect set of data. He goes, now that shouldn't stop us from using AI, but it should temper how we use it. And the example we both laughed at was, hey, this AI would work really well for men over 40 and who are white and who live in a very rich neighborhood. Now, if there's nothing wrong with an AI built like that, if you know that was what it built on, because hey, for that population, it could be very, very helpful. But when you try to apply it to an FQHC, right, in their population, okay, that's when you have to go, okay, maybe I can't assume that AI is going to be perfect in that situation. Because what he brought up a great point is that we definitely complain about the fact that the data can be biased, But waiting for the data to be unbiased is also not possible. It's
Good
always
point.
going to have biases. So he goes, what his argument he was making, which was very astute, is we just need to know the limitations of the data it was based on. And then we, as the humans, can make the decision of how we apply that AI tool, which I think is the smarter way to go.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's Visual DX taught me about this, that if you have to make a deliberate effort to get the data. So I think in their case, they needed the data from people of color. And it turns out in their Visual DX, which diagnoses based on the skin and a picture of the skin, like if you go and make deliberate efforts to get the data from, people of color, which, obviously in the skin is a very big thing, right? Like you can solve this problem, right? Like, and so that's the other piece of it. Sure, one, understand what the limitations are, and that most clinical trials and research is done in urban cities that are largely white male, whatever, right? Like that have that discrimination, not discrimination, but that population, right? That you can solve that by going out and getting the other data and making it a actual effort to get that data to solve the problem for all populations rather than just the one that's convenient for you.
No, and I go back to something that Charlie Harp said from Clinical Architecture, right? He's totally into data quality. That was his basic warning, was to say, look, we're building AI and it's wonderful and it is great, but the data that we're basing a lot of AI on is not perfect. And in fact, it's probably poor quality when you think about it, right? Like there's a lot of manipulation that has to happen to make it normalized. We don't really know sometimes the origin of these data sets that are available to train these AIs, right? So we might even not even be aware of the bias that's in it. And he goes, so that is a big problem. And what he was basically saying is that we need to invest more in that data quality, but also in the what are called data origination or data pedigree. We need to understand where this data comes from. So we might not want to, we can't know maybe who it was specifically, but we do need to start to look at what was the race, what was the ethnicity, what's the social economic of this person that we're looking at to train this AI on, because all of those can influence the AI's benefit on the other end.
Yeah, and then you have companies like Veranovum that are using AI to solve the problem that you said, which is actually improve the quality of the data, which goes exactly to this topic, which is AI is eating everything in healthcare, whether it's cleaning the data, whether it's outreach. I literally can't think of any piece of healthcare IT that's not getting touched by AI.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, John, we've definitely identified the fact that we could have a whole episode just talking about this last topic around ethics and use cases and things like that. But
Yep.
That is all the time we have this week for this episode. So thanks to all of you who've tuned in to this episode of Healthcare IT Today. And for more details about our show, you can check out the programs page at healthcarenowradio.com. And please share your comments and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com. And of course, on social media using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung, along with my health IT collaborator, John Lynn. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and we'll see you on the next one.